everyone. It's David from Fit and Strong, and today we are very excited to welcome for the first time on the podcast a female coach. And from our side, it's really exciting to have someone like Sue Bush, part of the Physique Development team, to be talking about a very interesting topic, which is training specifics for female lifters. And who else but Sue can bring us information that's on another level around training specifics for you, for the women and the girls that are following us. For those of you who don't know Sue, she's part, as I said, from the Physique Development team. We already had a conversation with Austin, and together with Alex, they provide training information through our YouTube. They have a website. Also, the three of us are coaches and competitors. Sue, I believe, started and competing in 2016. She's AC certified trainer, and also she's a certified fitness nutritionist. She's coaching and teaching clients for the past few years, but she's also continuing to pursue her education. Now she's living with her husband Alex in Kentucky, and they are providing fitness and nutrition information on a daily basis. Welcome, Sue, and let me know if I missed anything on your.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And you did not miss anything. You nailed it. So you're all good on that. We did just very recently move, so we're in Ohio now, but
Oh,
everything else
that's
is
great.
perfect. Yes, it's very recent, so I wouldn't expect anyone to be keeping up that close of tabs. But yeah, I am a co-owner of Physique Development, and we do have multiple other coaches on staff. So we have the three owners, like you mentioned, Alex, Austin, and I, and then we have a staff of about 12 and growing. So it's really cool to be able to have that in place. And we do have a majority of female clients. So female muscle growth and female just being able to see success and being able to get the results that you want is a huge passion of ours in general.
That's great. So everyone take your notebooks and keep notes. So it will be an interesting one. Okay, so I believe we can start. And the first topic I would like to touch base on is related to training volume. So a lot of people and there are a lot of people doing podcasts talking about volume, and they always, I believe, break down from the perspective of men. But for women, is there a difference? Like, is that gender specific, or again, it's something based on how long have been lifting?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat gender specific, especially when we're talking about the volume allocated towards different muscle groups. So, whenever someone says that they have like a male program or a female program, it is important to note that it's not like, oh, only females or only males can do this program. It's normally denoted that way due to what muscles that gender specifically wants to grow. So, for example, a male centered program might have a lot more volume for their chest than a female program, or a male program might have more volumes to their quads than a female program. And a female program might have more volume for your glutes or your shoulders than a male program. So it's something to not necessarily look at it as, okay, females and males, but more so, what are your specific goals that you're trying to reach and accomplish? Because I think that's the base of it all, is not kind of simpling it down to just male versus female. While there are a lot of differences in males and females, and females are a lot more complex when it comes to the internal side of things, and seeing those physique changes, and there's just more variables at play. It is something where it's not necessarily just males or just females. It's more so of what you're wanting to accomplish there.
Okay, and when we speak about volume, there are also three other variables within training that are intensity and frequency. How those goes hand in hand from for women specifically? Let's say for frequency perspective and intensity, should women train only like light, 15 to 20 reps, or like avoid heavy lifting? And how often they should target specific muscle group for optimal results?
Yeah. So when it comes to females and being able to see those strides forward for what they're wanting to do, oftentimes it does say that females want to tone. So you should do lighter weights and do more reps. But I think it's really important to be able to zoom back a little bit and look at that context from a wider sense instead of just looking at it in a vacuum. When we're talking about the term tone, it's really going to be something where you are gaining muscle and losing fat to be able to see that. If you go through a dieting phase and you're like, man, I still kind of look skinny skinny fat, or I'm not seeing like these capped delts that I want to see, that's normally due to the fact of not you need to tone more, but you need to be able to build more muscle to be able to see those strides that you want to see within your physique. So within that, when we're looking at training frequency and training volume, and then looking at what that looks like with the intensity as well. Again, taking a step back and looking at the different metrics to move forward. So when we're looking at training, it's not cut and dry of, hey, if you want to see this result, you only do this kind of training. There's going to be three main training umbrellas, I'll say, because each of them have subcategories, but we're looking at metabolic training, neurological training, and hypertrophy training. And so if I were to give a standard answer of, hey, if you want to be able to see results, just do this type of training, or just do this many sets, this many reps, this volume, then that's really shortchanging what you're able to see success in, because you want to be able to think about your trainability within a certain phase. And so what that means is we're looking at the stress that you're able to be under. So the stress of the training plus the stress of your life, because the stress going on in your life is going to impact your ability to recover. And what we're always looking at is we want to train hard and recover harder. And if we're training past the amount that we can recover from, we're not going to be able to see the adaptations that we want to see there. And so being able to kind of look at that of, you have this chart of, hey, here's the stress that's going to be from training, here's the stress from outside life, and then here's my ability to recover. We want that to be a pretty big gap so that you can see those strides forward. And then you want to be able to take a step back and look at your overarching goal. Is your overarching goal to lose fat? Is your overarching goal to gain muscle? Or is your overarching goal to kind of stay where you're at? And so being able to see what that is going to be huge for you, because having clarity on what you're trying to do is going to allow you to put together a game plan to head in the direction that you're going to be able to see success in. So for myself right now, the goal is majorly muscle growth. And so it has been something as far as prioritizing hypertrophy training over other training while still having those trainings in place, and really being able to focus on that recovery aspect and how much we can push my body and feed my body to be able to see the growth that we want. So coming back to your original question, I know it's a little long-winded, but I am someone that you'll get to know very quickly, wants to make sure that I make it clear what we're looking at. And I normally give more information than needed, just because I don't want anyone to draw a conclusion that I didn't mean from speaking. But within that, coming back to, okay, what does that look like for volume for women, or frequency, or being able to look at your intensity? And that comes back to, what is your base goal? What are you trying to accomplish here? Are you someone who's in his hormonal dysfunction and you really need to focus on rest? That's going to really determine how much intensity you have, how much frequency you have, and how much volume you have. Are you shooting for growth? Are you shooting for maintenance volume? What are you trying to accomplish is really going to denote what those goals are. So again, it's not just breaking it down to female specific, but personally, what are your goals? So that's why when you ask questions on Instagram, a lot of times people say it depends, and people hate
Exactly.
that answer, but it very much so does depend on, okay, what are you trying to accomplish here? So when we're looking at intent and we're looking at frequency, frequency is something that you can honestly play around with a decent bit. And that is going to, again, depend on training stimulus and how able you are to recover. If I have a client that's in a place that has super high stress, really low sleep, or low sleep quality, they're struggling with other aspects, I'm not going to have them training a million times for frequency for sessions. And I'm going to likely not have as much frequency for groups, because they might need a longer time to recover from those. But when we're looking at your volume, again, if they're very, very high stress, I'm not going to give them the highest volume, because they're not going to be able to recover from that. But if we're talking more specifics as far as what this looks like for biasing growth versus having more maintenance volumes, that's something sometimes people get confused on. Like I mentioned, as far as women possibly not wanting to train chest as much, it comes down to being able to look at, all right, there's going to be a range of sets for you to maintain your muscle, and then there's going to be a range of sets for you to be able to bias growth for that muscle. So it is also going to be dependent on what your training age is. So that's something I really wanted to go over here, because David had mentioned that a lot of the listeners are going to be beginner to intermediate.
Definitely.
And you have to take into account what your quality of rep is. Now, that's not to say, hey, can I do a rep and like I felt good about that quality? It's looking at, can you truly be able to get that muscle to do what it's supposed to do? So when I first started training, I wasn't able to utilize my muscles the way that I am able to utilize them now. I wasn't as efficient within being able to use my muscles. And that's a huge thing. If your efficiency within doing the exercise, being able to have the execution and know what muscle group and understand that to its base core. So if we're looking at neurological training, which is historically going to be lower rep, heavier load training, a lot of times people think, oh, you have to keep those reps under 6 for someone to have neurologically taxing training. But for a beginner, that might be closer to 10 than 6 because they might not be able to accomplish in 6 reps what someone more advanced can accomplish. So, if we're looking at hypertrophy training, which is going to be what we're going to want to focus on the most, doesn't mean we only do hypertrophy training, but when it comes to muscle growth, we're going to look at the sets and the reps. So, for sets per muscle group is going to be 12 to 16 for beginners. It's going to be 12 to 18 for intermediates, and it can be 16 to 20 for advanced. And that's also going to come down to the brass tacks of, again, how much can that person individually handle? So know that whenever I talk about specific numbers, they are still a recommendation, they are still a range, and you still need to be able to apply them to what your situation is. It's not, hey, I heard Sue on this podcast say I need to do this many sets. You go straight to doing that after not doing that many sets and then completely obliterating yourself. That's not a place that we want to be in. So past that, if we're looking at reps, again, this is specifically for hypertrophy training. If you're a beginner, you can be anywhere in that 12 to 15. Sometimes you can do that 10 to 12 range. If you're intermediate, you can go anywhere from 8 to 15. Again, it's going to be a pretty wide range depending on the situations. And for advanced, you can go anywhere from 4 to 12. So it's a bigger gap there, again, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what the end goal is. So it's always important to kind of take these little side steps that I'm taking, these little clarifications that I'm taking, and really being able to see, like, hey, when I listen to a podcast or when I see something on Instagram or when I hear something in conversation, it's not just that, hey, I take that, that's gold, I need to do that right this second. It's, hey, what nugget can I take from this to apply to my life and kind of play around with how that applies to me? Because it was something that we really push forward within physique development is education. It's not that I just want to tell you how to do it. It's more of, you want to teach a man to fish instead of giving him a fish.
Yeah.
And so being able to truly kind of take a step further, and this information that you're gaining, it might be something where you're like, oh my gosh, how do I even know how many sets I'm doing per muscle group? How do I even get that all together? Don't overwhelm yourself if you don't understand that. More so, let's focus on, okay, what are some of the other variables that might need to be nailed down before I fully understand the full cast of what she's talking about?
Cool. That's great. Thanks. So that was pretty extensive explanation, and I believe that that makes a sense and wraps up the 3 variables very well together. So given that the 3 training variables we explained right now, and I often see like a lot of women, they're like afraid to touch like free weights and do like barbell moves like squats, and given that they often are being advised to do machines and cardio, what's your opinion on like free weights versus machines when it comes to female lifters?
Yeah, I think that there's 2 different kind of routes to take here. One can be when it comes to females, you might have not been introduced to lifting, you don't know proper lifting form, it's something that you don't feel super comfortable with. I think it's positive to be able to use machines because it can allow you to have more stability. Machines create more stability within movements because, again, it's not free weight where it's just your at the
Yep.
distinction of if this weight is going to go somewhere, you have a path that the machine is taking and it's able to provide more stabilization. So I don't think it's inherently negative to just, oh, women should only do machines. It's more so, again, take a step back of why is the reason to do machines and should I do machines and free weights, which I'll get into here in a second. But it's more so looking at if you're very uncomfortable within training, you haven't had hands-on experience, and you do not want to injure yourself, machines are freaking great. go for it, utilize them, learn the movements. Maybe with being in the gym more, you're consuming the environment around you. Maybe you make a friend, maybe they help you lift, they go through form things, maybe you hire a personal trainer, whatever it may be. That gives you a good in without feeling like you're going to injure yourself and without having the fear of not knowing what you're doing with moving those free weights or picking up the wrong weight. Cause I used to be embarrassed about that of like, what if I have to put a weight back? And then I just couldn't lift that weight, but I was, really thinking I could. So I think that's one thing to kind of look at in that realm. And then if we take the other route, I think it's extremely important to have variety within your movements. Now, that does not mean to do a different Instagram swipe workout every day and to always do different movements. You want to be able to see progression within your movements, but it is very positive to have a varying resistance profile and to make sure that you mechanically can move in a certain way. So if you only do machines your whole entire fitness career, that really takes away some of the functional aspects of training, that your body can move freely instead of being in a more stable plane, which isn't bad. But again, we want to look at what this does for our body in general. So, something I always like to express to clients is we're not just looking at the aesthetic side of, hey, how good can my body look? Of course, I love that side, and it's a very welcomed little extra that you get for training. But I also want to look at the base of health. And so we want to take into account, hey, how is my body moving? And is it going to be able to move for as long as I want it to? So, for example, my dad might be doing exercises and he's just kind of doing the leg press, leg extension, leg curl. That's great. And when I was training with him in person, I had him do more free weight and more glute movements. And he was like, why am I doing this? I'm not trying to get huge glutes. And I was like, I get it. But as you age, if you do not have the musculature at your glutes, you're really going to have some pelvic dysfunction as you age. And so being able to kind of go zoom back of, hey, what health aspect are we looking at here? What's going to be helpful for my body? And then, of course, how can I look the best that I want to look? Because you can achieve that. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
So, what I'm talking about within resistance profiles, for example, a dumbbell does not have the same resistance profile as a cable. And if you go ahead and pick up a 10-pound dumbbell versus put the cables on 10 pounds and go ahead and do a lateral raise, you'll very quickly realize that they are very different resistance profiles. And one might feel a whole hell of a lot heavier than the other one. And so it is very important to use a whole array of training to be able to move your body the best, to focus on your motor patterns and your movement patterns and your mechanics of a movement, and just to be able to have the confidence that you can go through and do different things. And that's going to help with your balance and your core strength and the trunk of your body truly being able to handle these movements. Because something that might have some more stabilization, you might not have to brace your core as much, and then your core might get pretty weak from that. So the more that you can kind of ask yourself even questions of, hey, does this make sense? You can kind of zoom back and have these conversations with yourself of, it's not like, well, I didn't know all those things that Sue just mentioned. All right, let's start at, if you're brand new to the gym, or maybe you've been to the gym a little bit, let's just kind of ask questions to yourself of what makes the most sense. And oftentimes what makes the most sense is what ends up being correct in the grand scheme of things when it comes to health.
Great, thank you, Sue. And as a summary, I believe that we can say that our followers, in terms of the information you provided, that specifically for training, it's not only the visual appearance, but also we need to consider like health and movement. And we're not doing that like for 3 months just to look good naked on the beach, but also in the long run to be able to move freely, to feel better, to be functional. So yes, it's everyone wants to have like that duration and the abs in the end of the day, but we should not like neglect the movements that initially, before being exercises, they're movement like the squats. So it's good to have a variety and some exercises to support your lifestyle in general, not
Yeah.
only.
I will just say, because I feel like I didn't answer one part of your original question, talking about women who are afraid to do those bigger movements of the squats or the deadlift or bench or whatever it may be. And what I can say from my own experience, as well as from someone who is an expert in this sense, is being able to look at what those movements are going to do for you. So, again, it comes back to your base goals, but those movements are freaking great to be able to have really high output. Where some other movements that are more accessory based are great movements. I'm not going to sit here and say you should only do one or the other. It, again, is something that we want to look at both, but it is something that being able to do a squat, you're hitting multiple parts of your legs, you're learning how to brace your core and use secondary movements. So, it's a very helpful motor pattern to do, as well as it can really help you hit a big muscle group as your whole leg and get that output. And if for females who might be scared of, oh, if I squat, then I'm going to be huge, or if I bench, I'm going to be huge, I can tell you that those movements have only helped my physique look the way that it does. And I don't say that in a sense of do exactly what I do and your body will look exactly like mine. It doesn't happen that way. You could eat exactly what I eat, train exactly how I train, have the exact routine I have in a day, and maybe still not look like me. And that's something that's very beautiful, that we all have our own bodies and it's very unique. But it's something to be able to kind of look at the base of that, of being able to have that output is really good, again, not only for the motor pattern, but that's going to burn more calories, as well as being able to have more stress and tension on that muscle group. And something for females is that they won't train their chest, and that can be a very negative, because if you only train your back and don't train your chest, again, that comes down to how your body moves. And if you have not trained your chest at all, then your back, that can cause you to have some slouching, some hunching, not being able to support yourself. If you ever get pregnant as a female, then not being able to support the weight in front of you, not being able to do a lot of things that are going to help you down the road and help your physique. Where training my chest has helped fill out my whole upper body and allowed my delts to look better, because I have pictures of like when I had a very little developed chest versus now. And I personally very much so like how my physique looks now. It's more balanced and it's able to help other aspects of how I live throughout the day.
Okay, and believe you naturally filled into the next question I was going to ask, specifically for body part periodization. So what is your opinion for female lifters? Should they train specific body parts more than others? You mentioned like being pregnant down the road, like every woman, that's a natural thing with their loved one to be able to prepare their bodies to do that. Like we've been through that 6 months ago, and we do know that training and specific body parts being trained well support pregnancy, and like Spasimira had like a very easy like pregnancy, and because of the training and the activity she had before that, it was easy for her to support like the baby and to feel good. When other we have been seeing like our friends and other people like around us that been that active, it was like hard for them to do that. But specifically in general, how do you like advise in terms of body part prioritization?
Yeah, I think it again comes back to what your overall goal is or what you're trying to accomplish. And so, if it comes down to you're new to the gym or you've never been super consistent in the gym, I would not personally bother with trying to bias one muscle group or anything like that. I would really focus on some core things as far as your sleep, your water intake, your food sourcing, and being able to hit things consistently, being able to really nail down execution. Because honestly, if you don't understand the movements or you don't have good execution, you're not going to see the changes that you want to see and you could cause injury. So, really focusing on some base things is going to be the better bet for anyone, even if your goal is to get pregnant, even if you have goals down the line to see certain body parts grow. We want to be able to start in something that is maintainable, sustainable, and makes the most sense. So, everything within your fitness journey is going to be just that, a journey. It's a stepping stone for the next one. Some of the things that I worry about now or work on now or a priority of mine now couldn't even begin to be a priority of mine when I first started lifting. And so being able to not get too ahead of yourself of like, well, I see this person doing this, or like, for example, I'll have people be like, well, should I do intermittent fasting or should I do this or should I do this? And it's like, hey, let's get some basics down before we start getting into more specialty stuff. But let's say that you've consistently followed something, you really want to see growth in a certain area. I think that it's more than fine to be able to focus on, hey, let's go ahead and bias that. So, this whole past improvement season, we've really been biasing my shoulders and my glutes. And that's been just going after it with volume and making sure that gets to where it wants to go. And then talking about pregnancy, it's something that I definitely talk with clients about, because you are supporting not only another human being inside of you, but the weight that's coming to your core and your midsection. So having a strong core is huge. Really making sure your chest and back are developed are huge too, because again, if your chest is not developed, then you have that hunching, and then you have all of the weight coming forward on your stomach. That can cause a lot of dysfunction and a lot of discomfort, as well. Being able to work on things as far as your pelvic floor are going to be huge if you're pregnant or plan to become pregnant or are pregnant. You can do it even when that's happening, as well as your lower body strength, because you're carrying more weight. You want to be able to carry that and be efficient within that. So it is going to be something that I'm all for, being able to accomplish what you want to accomplish, but making sure you're taking that step in front of the other to get to that point. And I often talk with clients about effort versus expectations, as well as where they are in their fitness journey. And that's not to discourage someone to want bigger things for themselves or to accomplish bigger goals, but you can't run before you walk. And so you want to be able to take that into consideration of, hey, do I have the foundations down to be able to keep moving in the direction I want to go to see the success? Because if you were to ask me, hey, how have you seen the success that you have? At the core of it is having non-negotiable habits that I did consistently over time. It wasn't like, oh, I did this one exercise and everything was perfect. It was, hey, consistent habits over time allowed me to see the results that I see.
Great, great. Thank you, Sue. And when talking about female lifters and their training, there's something very specific, unique to them, which is the training around the menstrual cycle. What is your opinion on like leading and creating that training program around that? Who is it for, and is every female lifter can benefit from it? And in general, your recommendation from that part of the month, if you put it that way.
Yeah. So this is something that became pretty popular, I would say, a few years ago, as far as training around your menstrual cycle. And all these articles were coming out and videos and people pushing forward. Hey, if you're in your luteal phase, do this. If you're menstruating, do this. If you're in your ovulation phase, do this. And I think to a certain degree that can be beneficial, but I think it also puts you more in a box or puts more restrictions on you, where at the end of the day, what you want to focus on is how you are personally feeling. Now, any female listening to this can really relate to each and every individual person's cycle is extremely different. I have clients and friends who it is their worst time of their life. They're not straight up not having a good time. And then I have clients and friends who it's just a little blip and they're good to go. So it is going to depend on how you personally feel and how your menstrual cycle is affecting you. But I don't necessarily think, as a coach as well as a female who has a menstrual cycle, I fit into both camps there, that you need to completely redo your training. And hey, your hormones are lower during this time, so you shouldn't have as much output. Or again, you want to focus on how you personally feel. And the more that you can get in touch with your own body, the more that you can be able to understand what your body is telling you and listen to your body, that's where you're going to see the most progress, instead of trying to have so many hacks for everything, or feel like, well, I was told that when my hormones are lower here, I should rest more, even though I feel really good and I feel like I could go train. I was told this, so I should only do that. So it's something, as far as, again, very common theme with me. It's not looking at that in a vacuum of, hey, your hormones are changing, so you should completely change how you do things. And it's also something where I'll just say, from a female perspective, not a coach perspective, that would be very, very tedious to completely change the structure of all of my training based on my cycle, because the recommendations that are there are basically like, hey, take a week off this week, only do HIIT training this week, do strength training this week, really focus on yoga this week, where it's like, for what my goals are and what I want to accomplish, that doesn't align with that. Now, let's say you're a lifestyle client and you feel those exact ways that they talk about in the articles and in the research, then by all means do it. And if you love it, then that is phenomenal for you. I'm by no means saying not to do it, not to try it. It's more so of being able to be in tune with what's going to be best for you, how you feel best. So that's another thing where I have clients that they have problems hitting their food on a daily basis. If I'm changing their training every week, and having them change what they're doing, that could add more problems with consistency and cause it to be harder for them. So you need to be able to look and know, okay, what am I able to accomplish? What makes sense within my life? And how do I feel? And am I able to read what my body is telling me? And I can tell you that if you're listening to this and you're like, I never have a freaking clue what my body is telling me, I don't know what it's telling me, that the way to get more in tune with your body is to have more variables nailed down so you can really see, hey, what is my body trying to tell me? Because if you have 1,700 things going on, it's going to be really hard to see, hey, my body is telling me this one thing. Whereas if you have more variables in line, then you can be more of like, hey, I'm feeling this way. It makes sense because X, Y, and Z. So the more that you can kind of keep tabs on your body, the more that you can be in tune with your body, ask yourself questions, keep track of that, the more you're going to be able to know what your body is asking you or needing you. And that's something where I even see where clients have issues when it comes to, oh, am I taking a rest day because I'm lazy, or am I taking a rest day because I actually need it? And so that's going to be something of that's going to come down to, again, getting more in tune with yourself, of being able to have those honest conversations, and to be able to look at the data of what it's telling you.
Great, love it. And now to the very most important questions, I might say, that I believe every woman asks herself: will women become bulky when they start weightlifting?
I don't know. Do I look pretty bulky to you? It is
That's come
something where,
misconception, like, those magazines, and like I believe there is some kind of a aura when like a woman
yes.
walks into the gym and like immediately something happens to her body and she pulls all that muscle on.
What I can tell you is that if you think that you're going to pick up some weights and all of a sudden turn into the size of a figure athlete or a physique athlete or a women's bodybuilder athlete, first, you should definitely get into those sports if you are going to accomplish that quickly, by just picking up some weights. But it's also something where if we truly, again, take a step back and ask ourselves some questions, do women that lift, do some of them possibly have more muscle than you personally want to carry? Yes. Does that mean that inherently, because you lift, you're going to look exactly like them? No. I would love to have the muscle size and the bulk of some of these figure and physique athletes. But that not only takes lots of years, but also some help along the way with some PEDs and some other stuff. And so it's not something that you are all of a sudden going to be this super jacked, bulky human being. And if you do get to a point that you're not happy with the amount of muscle that you have, the cool thing is you can always change it. You can always change the amount of volume that you're using to bring down to maintenance volume. You can atrophy your muscle if you want to. You can build more muscle if you want to. And that's the really cool thing, is it's not just, hey, if you lift, you're going to look this one way. It's if you lift or do any other kind of exercise, you can kind of choose how you're going to look. Now, it might be some trial and error. I'm not saying that you'll be able to look at someone and be like, that's how I want to look, so that's how I'm going to look. But more so, there's going to be some trial and error. You see how you look in one way. Oh, maybe I don't like that. Maybe I go a different way, and kind of play around with that. But I can tell you, after consistently lifting for, how many years is that now? 5 or 6 years. And I was lifting before that, but I would say like very consistent in the past 5 or 6 years. I have not reached the bulk that I have even wanted to reach with very consistent and continual effort towards that and lifting some pretty heavy loads. So you will not get to this point that you feel like you're just going to burst out of the seams because you have so much muscle. And if you do, please contact me and let me know your secrets of how that happened to you. But again, it's going to be something as far as building muscle, losing body fat, being able to see your body change and go over time. And with growing muscle, it takes a whole hell of a lot of time. So it's definitely not going to happen the first time you step in the gym, where again, 6 or 7 years of very consistent lifting, very consistent with my food, my diet, my regimen, everything. I still have not acquired the size that I want to with very actively trying. So take that with what you will, but I can almost guarantee you will not just turn into some bulk master. And again, if you do, please contact me. I would love to know your secrets.
Great, great. Thank you, Sue. I think that sums it up very, very well in terms of all the things we touch base on and we discussed today. And as a wrap up, is there anything you want to address, like, and make a summary or something you believe we missed throughout the conversation?
Yeah, I'll just kind of leave you guys with a few points to think about when it comes to lifting as well as the overall goal of gaining muscle. So, some things to think about. I did already mention that gaining muscle is difficult. So, it's going to take time. If you have a goal, if you want to look a certain way, part of the fun is the journey. I know that we all want to look a certain way and have abs in 12 weeks or whatever it may be, but true body composition changes are going to take time and it's going to be really rewarding over that time. If you're wanting to gain muscle, you don't have to eat in this massive surplus and be shoving food down your throat and get to a body fat that you feel like is very unhealthy and very uncomfortable at. It's something that you don't always need to eat in a massive surplus. You do have to eat above maintenance and train hard and recover harder. So it's important to keep that in mind. Within training, it's important to move away from just hit-based training or chasing a burn or a sweat, of really having periodized training. I will give a little shout out. We do have an app. So if you do want periodized training and you're new to the gym, it has videos, long form and short form. It has step by step of how to perform the exercise and it has it all laid out for you. And so I can send the link to David if he wants to put it in the show
Yep,
notes for
will be in the
getting
description.
into that. Perfect. But that's going to be a great place to start if you are beginner or intermediate. Even if you're advanced, we have advanced clients in there and athletes in there. So do not think that it's only if you're a beginner, but that's a great thing to really work on your execution and know that you have a program that you can trust. I would recommend picking movements that you are good at or wanting to get good at and really focus on those, and really put your focus forward on that. It's something that instead of trying to attack 7 things at once, think about, hey, what are 1 or 2 things I really want to be able to accomplish within this time frame? And so really focusing on your nutrition and being able to be consistent. If you're in the gym and you're working really hard and you're not focusing on nutrition at all, you're likely not going to see the results that you want to see. So learning about nutrition and focusing on that, having cardio in place. I know with building muscle, you might think, oh, I only need to do that if I'm trying to get lean, but cardio can be very helpful for your cardiovascular health, your mental health, your digestion, as well as just your overall body, how it functions. Motion is lotion, so it's good for you. And it's something that being able to set goals within a muscle growth phase is very important because again, it is going to take more time and it's a little bit less climactic than dieting, because in dieting in 12 weeks you can see some really crazy results, where within muscle growth within 12 weeks you might be like, okay, what's next? So it's something that being able to set those goals is going to be important, and realizing that it's not linear that you're going to see change. It might be in a linear path, but it's not going to be perfectly linear. The dots might be all over, but still headed in that upward direction. And then it's something that technique is going to be that cornerstone in creating tension, which is where we see growth. So, again, focusing on the basics of that exercise execution, of your nutrition, really prioritizing sleep. Sleep is so huge. I could do a whole thing on how important sleep is for muscle growth, fat loss, and basically everything else in your life, as well as being able to focus on water consumption, and being able to have adequate protein consumption and just quality food sourcing. So there's multiple facets to all of this. This really scrapes the surface. I think it did a great job of scraping the surface and being able to give you guys the information that you need to kind of, again, take that nugget, apply it to your life, kind of see what you needed to take from this. And maybe you re-listen to this in a month or two and take another nugget out from it and try to apply that to your life instead of trying to do a million different things at once. But what I would say, just from a female's perspective when it comes to lifting and all of that is to get out there and do it. It's something that it can be intimidating, it can be scary, it doesn't make it helpful that when you walk into a gym and it's majority of males on the floor, or maybe some gyms that have like these female only sections which are only going to be machines or kind of in this corner of pink machines, whatever it may be. But it is something that you pay a membership, you deserve to be out there, and at the end of the day, do what's going to make you happy. For so long I did not do the things I wanted to do to achieve what I wanted to achieve because I was so worried about other people's perceptions. And I did a little cheat code. I waited till college to make a bigger change because it wasn't as many people that knew me. But I kick myself time and time again for letting that be something that deterred me. Because growing up, I wasn't some fit person. I wasn't this person that people would go to for asking for how they look a certain way. No one ever freaking asked me that growing up. But it was something that I felt that I didn't deserve a spot there because I didn't know what I was doing or I didn't look a certain way. But I deserved a spot there first because I paid for that spot, but also you deserve it as much as anyone else. And so being able to really be empowered by your knowledge about the human body, by what you're able to accomplish. And I can tell you it's really freaking empowering to lift up some pretty heavy weights and set them back down. I don't know why, but it is. And you can see a lot of mental growth and change within that as well. So I wouldn't fear it. You might be scared of it, but really being able to kind of push yourself past those comfort zones, because that's where you're going to see the absolute most change and where you're going to see the most growth for yourself.
Great. I believe that was a very well a way to end up a great conversation where we cover great topics. And Sue, I want to thank you again for taking the time being our guest and providing that outstanding information. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I do know that everyone listening to that podcast, especially our female followers, will benefit a lot. And as you said, taking those nuggets, applying in their routine, and moving forward, improve and get better in lifting.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure it'll also be in the show notes where you can find me if you want to see more stuff with me on it. We also have our own podcast, which we haven't really had guests on it so far. So maybe we kind of dive into that and have David on. But thank you again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I feel very honored to be your first female coach guest.
It was a pleasure for us. Thank you for your time again.